Okay, hopefully this is recording. Again, my name is Jesse. I'm doing this in El Paso, Texas. I have been trying to figure out how to do the video essays that I believe are necessary. And I was going to do this on a cell phone, but then I realized the tablet is probably more useful. You're seeing a dark screen because I'm in my vehicle, the taxi I use. So you're going to see a lot of dark screens at this hour of the day. The issue today is I was listening to Laura Ingraham, and she was talking about the homeless situation in America. And they were talking to her callers. The issues came out that homelessness is related to drug use and mental illness. And it was almost one of the situations where people believe that it is hopeless, nothing can be done. And I know that something can be done because when dealing with people, there's a lot that can be done. We are very powerful individuals. It's unfortunate that society teaches us to not be powerful. So the first thing that I would say to individuals who want to get directly engaged in solving the homelessness problem, there's an idea that came to my head yesterday, but it's true. And the idea is of evaluation. You got to have the ability to evaluate the individual to see how far gone they are as far as them being able to help themselves. And there are individuals who prolong use of drugs, alcohol, or stress, just basic biological mental health issues. We didn't have a problem using the word retardation. Apparently now in society you cannot use that word, even if it fits. But you have individuals who just have lost touch with reality, are no longer capable of the basics of drinking water, of feeding themselves, of getting, of working enough to have even a small apartment. And those individuals, you're just going to have to resign yourself to the fact that you're going to have to take care of them 100%. And either in a facility or through a, with staff that visits them at a home. But the reality is that they won't stay put in a home. But that's the first thing you're going to have to do is deal with the individuals who just cannot cooperate, cannot participate, cannot take care of themselves, couldn't hold down even a part-time job, couldn't even drive an Uber car. And they need total care. So that's the first thing. And by total care I mean housing, food, medical, even mental health therapy. Because if you use the paradigm of behavioral conditioning, even though they may not want to participate, there are things that can be done to moderate behavior. I'm not a fan of turning people into chemical zombies, doping them up. Never been a person who happens to believe that medicine is the answer to everything. Excuse me. And then you got to deal with the reality that once you evaluate all these people that honestly just are going to have to be put under a total care paradigm, you have to then you move to, well, what are we dealing with the rest of the people who can somehow feed themselves and clothe themselves, and if you put them on a medication schedule, they probably could follow it. Attitude matters. And we are taught in our society how to be very negative. Even when you're dealing with mental health issues, the primary obstacle is the attitude that a person has. There are actually people with severe mental health issues who work and pay bills and have formulated families and are not homeless, are not addicted to drugs, are not have impact with is you're going to have to challenge their life philosophy. You hear a lot of negativity. Government can't do anything. Government doesn't do anything. People should be receiving services through Social Security disability, through welfare systems. Complaining that they're not, they're being ignored. And the reality is that if that is actually happening, it's not your primary resource. Your primary resource is you as an individual, you as a person. And the first thing that complicates our lives is thought. Now, thoughts complicate our life because of emotions. I've written papers on this. I've done video essays on it. The reason that I have that to this day I continue to write is because I happen to believe that the individual can learn a different way to think, and learning that different way to think will contribute to emotions, better emotions, and those better emotions will contribute to better behaviors. See, if you can affect the mood of an individual, if you can take a person away from a mood of fear, of anxiety, of depression, you can have great impact. But the way you take people away from anxiety and depression is you teach them a different way to process information, a different way to think. And dealing in the issue of homelessness, drug addiction, mental health issues, the first thing I would want to do is establish a structure, a system that teaches people how to think differently than they were taught or brainwashed by their society to think. And what you ultimately are doing is you're empowering the person. One, you're reducing the anxiety and the depression, which ultimately leads to people becoming overwhelmed and thinking that life is out to get them, and doing things that really are dangerous to them, are very unhealthy. That's how I decided to divide the issue. You're either living a life of health or you live in a life of illness. If you're wrapped up in the negativity, you're living a life of illness. You're trying, you're hoping that you can have health, but because of your mindset, you're burying yourself in negative energy. You're taking away your hope, you're taking away your confidence, your ability to think, to function, and you need these, you need these skills, these personal skills. It's not the job environment. Here now, people say that it's difficult to get a job. And I'm going to tell you that it's not difficult to get a job. It's just difficult to get a job that people are willing to do. And the job that they're willing to do is to stay home, play with their computers, and wait for the government check. And that's a mindset. They've been brainwashed. The majority of people that have been brainwashed into believing that for some odd reason, government is supposed to take care of them. And the end result of that, because we were meant to be ambitious, it's not a sin to be ambitious. That's how we were created. A toaster toasts bread because it was created to toast bread. Well, we were created to be ambitious. We were created to be social. We were, created to advance, to pursue things in life that enhance the human experience. But our society in the information delivery systems teaches a different way of life. And a lot of people fall into the trap of believing that. And the internal conflict, where you get the angst, the hurt, the pain and suffering, is that internally, because of our natural state, we want more than life is apparently providing. And I say apparently because we really can create anything. The Wright brothers who mastered flight started with an idea. Bill Gates, the Windows operating system, revolutionized the world. Computers have computers have revolutionized the world, but the majority of that has to do with the fact that computers are simple to use. And the individual who made computers simple to use was Bill Gates with his Windows operating system. You may not like Bill Gates, you may not like his operating system, but that's the reality, that's what happened. And it started with an idea of how can I do something better. And that's how powerful we are. When you're looking at these issues, when you're looking at societal structures and what can you change, what can you move, is you got to build a system where you're teaching health, where you're teaching biological health, but you're also teaching mental health. So you got to challenge the ideas that are contributing to the mental illness. The first thing I said is to evaluate the individuals and start putting them in categories. You're going to have a large percentage that need total care, but there are also individuals who you can teach a better way, where you can help understand life under different structures, different systems. So moving through, I've spoken about those who will need total care and those who you will need to challenge. The people that you can help to help themselves, you're going to have to challenge their life philosophies. What do they think? And you're going to have to replace the negativity with a positive philosophy. And again, you're seeing a huge dark screen because I'm doing this in my taxi. I'm getting to work. It's maybe 11 in the morning. You're going to hear the engine roar because, man, it's cold. I'm going to try to warm this thing up. But this is the way I figured I can do what it is that I need to do in a simple way. And if we're to believe that we are smart individuals, that we're beyond simplistic ideas, it is not impossible to build a society where individuals who have mental health issues, addiction is a mental health issue, and who cannot provide for themselves the basics of life, can be taught a different way. In our society, we have to look at the system that creates individuals with mental health issues, and which include addictions, and which include a very negative attitude, and which endangers the quality of life of a person. I've written articles and maybe done this or that video essay where I talk about how the information that we're exposed to is rather negative. It doesn't matter if you're listening to music, if you're listening to modern music, you get a very negative perception of life. If you're watching television, movies, it's all negative. You wonder how anybody at all could have a positive view of life when there's so much garbage in our information environment. So if you want to stop something, you want to stop the machine that's creating it. You want to stop the machine that's creating the anxiety. You want to stop the machine that's creating the depression, the ideas of suicide. Because that is what we're talking about. When you talk about mental health issues, you're talking about symptoms that have manifested because of thoughts and emotions. And if we look at our environment, there's a lot of negative things. So you have to, not through force of government, because I would not believe in that. I would not believe in government controlling information. But if we as members of society started to choose healthy information, then those people in Hollywood, those people who write songs, those people who write books would have to write the kind of books that we would buy. And they have poisoned us with negativity, but we continue to purchase their products, and the more that we continue to purchase their products, the more of their negative products they produce. So society, the information society in itself, is creating individuals who will have mental health issues, who will have addictions, who will not be able to meet the basics of life, and who will end up homeless, addicted to drugs, suffering from mental health issues. And it's an important point because it's a reality. And two, knowing that the information in our environment is toxic, then we should want to change it. And again, not changing it through force of government, just changing it by what we watch and what music we listen to. We need to become better people. Now, I also believe that we have an enormous amount of educational resources at our disposal where we can start teaching a healthier perspective of life. I think one of the greatest errors that we happen to have today in our world is this idea that there's this kind of society, this dark energy society that is just, poisoning us, and it's keeping us from having the kind of employment that we would like to have. And because of this idea, a lot of people don't go out and pursue what they want to pursue in life, and end up in an environment where they believe it is hopeless, and then they get into illness pathology. They can't sleep. They're not eating their three healthy meals, and I will use that standard. I mean, in diet, people who are involved in that are advising people to maybe eat 5 times a day, but smaller, meals. And if it does it for you, it does it for you. And there's another thing. If you're drinking chemicals, if you're poisoning your body with chemicals, sodas are chemicals. They're created in laboratories. This is not a natural product. It's not like water. Water is a natural product. Even though if you live in an industrial society, there's a good chance you have filtered water, processed water. Forget what else they call it, but it doesn't matter. If you're eating things with preservatives, Twinkies, packaged donuts, packaged cookies, desserts are not bad if you make them in your home with natural ingredients. When you're poisoning yourself with chemicals, it's going to have an impact on your physical self, on your biology. But as I was saying, we have so many resources in education. We can start structuring public education or early childhood education to teach a healthier perspective of life. When I look back at grade school, my experience in grade school, middle school, high school, I think it was even worse in high school. What I'm about to say was worse in high school. I cannot find one educator, one school administrator that I would have to say that individual impressed me. In fact, to get a bachelor's, and I have a bachelor's in psychology, started in El Paso, Texas, but finished off in Liberty University. Out of all, what I was going to say is, you're required to have a little bit more than 40 courses, which would mean 40 instructors, some professors. Out of all those individuals who led the courses, who were the professors or instructors in the courses that I took, there was only one person. So out of over 40, there was only one person that I would have to give a very high grade to, and that was the female French professor of the French course that I took. And I didn't take it because I wanted to, because you're just required to. A lot of things is wasted. But adults, educators, I think are part of the problem. And we want to be a better society, a healthier society, and two, we want to use our educational resources and build a society that, benefits us. In the public education, in the early childhood education, if you have a private school and you're concerned about the behaviors of your students that are being disruptive, that are interfering in the educational process, there are practices, strategies in behavioral psychology that can help you modify the behavior of students to a more positive attitude that will reduce the destructive and behaviors that interfere with education. It is not hopeless. And then again, the parent, moving from, in this discussion, from analyzing who are the people that are going to need total care to who are the people who can manage for themselves, understanding that we need to restructure the way they think, because negativity is the reason why people don't believe in their society, don't believe in themselves, don't believe they can get a job, don't think it's worth having healthy diets, don't think they're too stressed out to relax and sleep and allow the brain to relax. And then realizing that our society is toxic as far as the attitude that it teaches to individuals, and then realizing that we have educational processes that we can use to help people, not enter into a state of mental health issues. The majority of individuals are not born with mental health issues. The majority of individuals manifest or develop mental health issues through the course of life, and this is what I was coming to, that the parent, for many people, the parent or parents are the reason that they are scared, are the reason that they're overwhelmed with anxiety, are the reason that they're overwhelmed with depression. And in psychology, in the understanding of human psychology, we understand that this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with complications with anxiety, which is fear. We're dealing with complications of depression, which is a result of sadness. And we're dealing with complications, which is a mix of anxiety and depression. And when you start to teach people how to be better parents, how not to load their children up with anxiety, then you actually start to deal with the issue. And the importance of that is that if we want to honestly deal with the problem, we have to understand the problem. When you're going to employ over 1 million people, everybody's going to have their own idea, and everybody's probably going to start doing their own thing. And even in parenting, I am surprised that I live in an age where you tell a parent you're being abusive to your children, you're overloading them with anxiety. That's going to lead to real problems like bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder or major depression or panic or generalized anxiety. Any one of the many different mental health issues that develop when a person is overwhelmed with fear or depression. And you just cannot win when the people you're trying to tell to stop being abusive, one, don't want to understand that they are abusive, and two, by not understanding that they're abusive, are not going to change their behavior. We all see it. We see irrational parents yelling at their children. We see irrational parents jerking their children around, grabbing them by the hands and dragging them. Granted, the children, if they don't get their own way, it's the end of the world. If they forgot where they put their little teddy bear, it's the end of the world. So there are things, there are emotional experiences that children are going to go through that, you know, in the surface appear to be possibly leading to mental health issues, but in reality it's just a child being a child. We're talking about that. Children are children, and children want everything perfect the way they have manufactured their life. What I'm talking about is when you're spending your time calling your kid an idiot or a dummy or stupid or, you know, or ugly, or a long time ago I think it was a television program, we're talking about psychological abuse, and one of the professionals with a title, with a university degree, said, never tell your child, be a good person or I won't love you. And I honestly have to stop and think and ask myself, why would a person tell their child, I'm not going to love you? And it's foolish things like that parents do, that they think is correct, that is actually starting to contribute to manifested mental health issues in the child, that will stay within the child as the child progresses to be an adult, and will probably be in a greater degree as an adult. So if you want to deal with mental health issues, you want to deal with drug addiction, you want to deal with homelessness, you have to start at the beginning, and you really have to change the attitudes of members of society, and especially of individuals who are parents, who are mothers and fathers, who don't know how to comfort a child, who don't know how to teach a child. I was listening to a religious program yesterday, and they were talking about, you know, I tell parents to parent with love and wisdom, because you have to teach values, you have to teach lessons that the child will use as an adult to cope with life. But one of the ingredients this individual added, said you teach with love and wisdom and truth. And I was like, well, wisdom is truth. You don't have to add truth if you're using wisdom. But excuse me. As I've stated before, the more I talk, the more I cough. But, you know, a lot of people's truth isn't really truth. And if you honestly want to deal with it, and that's the reason for the video, is that people think that it's impossible to do. But it isn't impossible to do. It isn't impossible to talk to a person in a manner where they will understand that their coping strategies in life are wrong, and that they need to learn new coping strategies, and by learning new coping strategies, life will actually improve. The idea that it's hopeless, that nothing can be done, that there are forces outside of our control, is just that. It's foolish ideas, and that's what we're talking about. If you want to deal with any issue, you have to change the way people think. If you have a company and your employees are not good employees, you can the reason they're not good employees is because, I mean, most people who work somewhere understand that the employees have a negative attitude of the company. You know, think that the administration doesn't know what they're doing, believes that their management doesn't care about them, are you know, under the opinion that they could show up, that the employees are under the opinion they can show up whenever they want to show up, whether late or not, whether, you know, absent. And a lot of what happens in companies that doesn't contribute to the success of the company is directly related to the attitudes of the employees. So you either change the way your employees think, or you hire employees who have a healthy, positive attitude towards being a worker, an employee. In our society, teaches us to be negative about everything, to be negative about lawyers, doctors, police officers. Again, the information out there is very toxic, very negative, and a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, a lot of things that complicate the lives of individuals, is directly related to what they think. And people parent because they have these ideas that they believe are correct and are good strategies as far as parenting. You cannot allow a child to be left alone. A child left alone will find his or her own devices to entertain him or herself. If you're not an involved parent, and then you realize you have a 10-year-old that is very confrontational and doesn't listen to you, doesn't respect your authority as a parent, it's because you left that it's directly related to the fact that you left the child alone. And you left the child alone, and the child built his or her own idea about how his or her own day is structured, what he or she can do. And this child has figured out his or her own way of living, has figured out to serve themselves a bowl of cereal, maybe even cook up ham and eggs, go to the room with a glass of milk and watch a little TV or play with their toys. And they've built a life for themselves because that's what we do. We survive. That's how we were built. And then you happen to believe that your child shouldn't be eating in the room, and you want to correct that behavior, and you find yourself with a very confrontational, erratic 10-year-old. The 10-year-old isn't the problem. It's the parent that ignored the 10-year-old for 10 years and allowed the 10-year-old to build his or her own cycle of life, rhythm of life. So I guess the admonition to all parents is don't believe that just because you're in the same house as a child, that the child is somehow learning your values, is somehow learning what you want the child to learn. You have to have structured, direct education, and that means you have to know what it is you want to teach the child. Math teachers know what they need to teach their students. Science teachers know what they need to teach their students. Parents apparently don't know what it is they need to teach their children. And it isn't a totality. If it was a totality, the human race would be over. There are a lot of people who know how to give the child what the child needs as the child is growing and developing and becoming an adult. But we have enough members of our society as parents who honestly just don't know how to be parents. I see a lot of stupidity, and I ignore a lot of that stupidity. There used to be a person who regularly would tell me, you can raise your child the best you can, but as soon as they go out the door, society is going to change them. And if you study psychology, and I always tell people when they say something stupid, you're violating one of the written rules of psychology. And these are rules that have been studied and tested and found to be true. And those of us who study psychology, we know they're true, but people out there in the real world have their own way of thinking. But if you honestly believe that you can meet your child's emotional needs, which is necessary in a child-parent relationship, and that you can teach your children values in a healthy, productive manner where the child is not being abused, isn't being called a dummy or an idiot or being yelled at or jerked around, that child is going to go out into society and then become something totally different. I'm sorry, you're violating the rules of psychology. If you teach a child well, your child will not become a drug addict. If you teach your child well, your child will not become a gang member. I am sometimes amazed. I listen to a lot of Christian radio, and I am amazed at how many people say, I was raised in a good home, my parents were members of the church, my dad was a pastor, and I ended up addicted to drugs and hanging out with gang members. it church is probably a good place, but the reality is, unless you're teaching those lessons, unless you're teaching those values, and being under the assumption that just because you're in close proximity to your child, somehow through osmosis, your child is learning your value system, you're wrong. While I was earning my degree in psychology, there was this individual, professor of psychology, I don't know his name, doesn't matter. It was in the literature that we have to read. Honestly believed that he could turn his child into anything that he wanted his child to be. If he wanted his child to be a nurse, he could use these strategies of psychology and make his or her child a nurse. That would you could through manipulation not only make the person a nurse, but make a person a happy nurse, a person who wants to be a nurse. But this individual found out that because he practiced it on his actual children, that wasn't the case. But again, the discriminating factor is how do you present the information. And this individual with a PhD in psychology thought that information should be presented in a particular way, and the result that he wanted didn't work out. And a lot of times parents believe that they're correct, and you're wrong. Let me tell you this. If your parenting strategy is to ignore your child until your child becomes disruptive, and then to try to use irrational yelling and screaming and forms of physical punishment, you're wrong. The reality is, if you start from day one, there's one life experience that I just like talking about. It is an awesome experience. When I was a security guard at a hospital, children love to run, especially when they go through doors. And in front of the hospital, there was regular vehicle traffic. And I saw this cute little girl, in her little summer dress, red dress with flowers on it, her little ponytails. Very young, coming out with obviously the person that was her father. And, under those circumstances, you're concerned that there's traffic and your child may run out in traffic. But the awesome part of the experience is that the little kid had to be less than 2 years old. The little kid looks up at her dad and tells her dad, "Give me your finger. I'll help you cross." And in a situation where most parents would fail at having the kid not run out into traffic or holding on to the hand of the kid so the kid doesn't get away and run out into traffic, here you have this little cute 2-year-old girl who the parent has somehow managed to teach the child how to look out for traffic and how to cross an area with traffic in a way that isn't going to endanger her, and in a happy way, not in a screaming, yelling, "I don't want to do it, don't leave me alone, don't hold my hand." Little kid actually said, "Give me your finger, I'll help you cross." And that's a very creative parent. That's a very intelligent parent. That's a person who knows how to work with children. And a lot of parents don't. So when you're dealing with the issue of ultimately what is it that you're going to do when you're dealing with mental health issues, when you're dealing with drug addiction, and as it relates to homelessness, we are a sick society. We spend our time beating up on each other. We give dirty looks to one another. We sneer. And in the calendar year of 2016, the present era, it is getting worse. People are holding a high degree of animosity towards each other. And there is a lot of behaviors that are related to politics. However, there's also, for a long time I would not consider dark forces in my understanding of human behavior, human psychology. It is only after after Jesus Christ got my attention, that I started considering it. And it is. The evidence is there. People who don't believe in God will not acknowledge it. But the reality is that there is evidence there that there are dark forces, that Satan is seducing individuals by planting ideas in their heads, and eventually those ideas, but it's temptation. It isn't an automatic. You're a 13-year-old boy and Satan is telling you to go look in windows to see young girls take their clothes off. It's a temptation. There's no remote control. Can't force you to do it. And when parents are not teaching values, are not strengthening the if you want to call it the muscle of values, or there is no exercise of values, then the child is subject to the influences of society. And so when you're dealing with this, and I spend a lot of time because it is so annoying that things are so easy and people make it so difficult. It is not hard to be a parent. It is hard to be a parent when you're a person who's being tossed around by life. If you're working too much, if you're responding to the negative information that exists in our society, and you're never wanted to be a parent. You got to deal with the issue and the fact that a lot of people who are parents never wanted to be parents in the first place. And it is important because that's when it starts. There are biological influences to human behavior. That is correct. It's an absolute. That some, not a lot, let's say 10% of mental health issues are directly related to the biology of the person. I've spoken on the brain, neurotransmitters, specific areas of the brain. We know mental retardation exists. We know the brain, the physical brain itself, complicates life for a lot of people. So, and then those complications turn into anxiety or depression, overwhelming anxiety. The individual experiences a lot of pain and suffering, what I put under the label of hurt and angst, and it's hard. It really is hard for a lot of people to be awake and to be experiencing this boiling pot of emotions. And it isn't because they have been abused. It isn't because they have been tortured by life. A lot manifested mental health issues also come from failure, from wanting to have something in life and always finding yourself denied. That's the reality. It's not just abusive parents. If you get through life 18 years of age, you graduated with a good GPA, you get yourself into university, you're a good student, you know how to study, you want to succeed in your career, and you end up in an emotional relationship, a romantic attraction that doesn't go the way you wanted it to go, you're going to suffer pain. You're going to experience pain and suffering. And if you have not been taught, if you don't have people to talk to who can teach you how to deal with it, see, this is going to be a lot longer, but it is important that these issues are here and are discussed, because if you want to deal with the issue, you got to understand it. So when you're talking about mental health issues and addictions and homelessness, you got to understand, why is the person suffering from major depression or panic attacks or generalized anxiety or bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is when you're sad and then you're erratic. You're experiencing manic, and we see that. You see that a lot. I see it here in my taxi. We have our regular family of homeless people that walk through here. We see them almost every day, yelling, screaming. Sometimes they're yelling and screaming, and sometimes they're just lethargic, laying on the sidewalk. and not having much energy. So all of the illnesses are possible. One, you experienced abuse because the parent just didn't know how to be a parent, or even worse, there are parents who don't know how to be parents, but then there are parents who actually abuse their children in the most extreme ways that we can imagine. And if you're going to start dealing with it, you have to understand it. And you have to understand that if you find yourself, let's say a 33-year-old woman addicted to meth because she was raped repeatedly by her father, it's not hopeless. That's the problem that we have, is that when we think in a certain way, we come to the conclusion that it's hopeless. But if we realize that we can ease the pain, either through medication or therapy, I'm willing to allow a certain degree of medication, not that much, but if you can calm the person and start working with the fear, what I call fear of fear, when people have serious issues in their lives and they want to evaluate them, start thinking about them, to put their emotions in place, the first thing that they start to experience is fear, because the pain and suffering is overwhelming. And eventually they become conditioned to being afraid of fear, of that pain and suffering that they experience when they start to want to unravel their emotions. And we are, the way we were built, we don't want to be in distress. So we're trying to work our way through it. But the way to work through it is to actually focus on it, and focusing on it for a lot of people is just too overwhelming. To sit down and meditate on why they're feeling what they're feeling. When I started writing, the conclusion that I came to is I put everything starts with what you think. There may be people who disagree, but everything starts with what we think. What we think contributes to our emotions, and our emotions contribute to our behavior. And that's what we're talking about. Being homeless is a behavior. Being sad or depressed is a behavior. Fear, anxiety is a behavior. So with people with extreme mental health distress, I advise them to, one, start learning how to relax. That's the first thing you need to do, is relaxation therapy. And once you teach people how to relax, to not wake up and want to run in 100 different directions, you can get to emotional management. And to me, emotional management is just asking yourself, what is it that I'm feeling, and why am I feeling it? The emotion can be something that's related to something realistic, like having lost a job, somebody important to you passing on, dying, romantic breakups, realistic things. It can be set in something that is real. Then there are emotions that are not real, and it's nothing more than a creation in our own mind. We believe that there is a reason to be afraid. We believe that there's a reason to be sad. But in reality, there isn't a person who is causing us problems, and life itself is not causing us problems. We have just convinced ourselves that that something in life is of the type that should lead to it. And once we realize what actually has a true basis, we can deal with what has a true basis. If we're in a relationship that is abusive, the healthy thing to do is to leave. If, work really is something we don't like, the healthy thing to do is to change where it is we're working. And this is what you're going to have to be teaching people who have mental health issues. When you start working with them and changing their ideas from the negative to the positive, to empower them to believe in themselves and be able to function in a job and to live healthy lives, you need to teach them, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to have to deal with the overwhelming emotions, and you deal with that through relaxation therapy, literally teaching people how to relax, how to breathe, how not to, to separate themselves from their rambling thoughts. And you can do it by the next step. You go through relaxation therapy, you go through emotional management, and then to what I call cognitive restructuring. And the cognitive restructuring is actually changing a person's philosophy from a negative to a positive. And you can use cognitive restructuring to help the individual relax. See, and the problem is that I understand that I have sat down and meditated on these issues and come to these conclusions because I have studied it, and I know that the dynamic in human psychology, what we're trying to do, and why we have this internal conflict that sometimes leads to mental health issues. And I'm realizing that people out there are going to be saying, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And when people like myself, try to have an impact on something that is complicating society, what we end up doing is we end up fighting with people who have no education, who haven't meditated on the issues, who haven't studied, who haven't learned, and who just don't want to have an impact. I'm sorry, the driver in front of me, just his nasty habit of overcharging and running the customer out. All right, so the issue being is, in reality, the strategies to deal with homelessness that may be due to drug addiction and maybe due to mental health issues can be used in anything. Anything you want to deal with, doesn't matter what the bad behavior or the mental health paradigm is. If you want to deal with generalized anxiety, if you want to deal with major depression, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, whatever you want to deal with does not matter. What matters is how, are you willing to do what is necessary to get the job done? And there are actual studied set rules of human behavior, and we understand these set rules of human behavior. That's why I understand that you need to start with relaxation therapy, and from relaxation therapy you move to emotional management, and from emotional management you move to cognitive restructuring. In cognitive restructuring, I have basically run it down to life is meant to be fun, enjoyable, pleasant. And the way we get to a position of fun and enjoyment is what I call simple, healthy pleasures of life. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, why do you want to talk to a homeless person who has mental health issues and drug addiction about simple, healthy pleasures of life? Because that's how you get the individual to focus on something that is good in life, something that they can believe in. And I always said that the person that you can believe in is yourself. If you don't believe in your politicians, if you don't believe in your societal services, government services, the person you can believe in is yourself. All of us know how to think. All of us know how to organize our thoughts. All of us know how to create a plan of action for our desires, what we want to accomplish, and we know how to act. We have the ability to act. We have the ability to print out our resume and our cover letter, and take a bath, comb our hair, shave, put on a suit, and go out and distribute our resumes to where they're hiring, and then wait to get a phone. All of us know how to act. So we know we have all the necessary skills to deal with the challenges of life. What is holding us back is our attitude, our lack of confidence, or even our lack of faith. And when you start looking at life in a different way, we start realizing that life is meant to have fun, and that we can actually have a pleasant, enjoyable life if we focus on simple, healthy pleasures of life, like friends and family members and good literature. Not all information is negative or bad. And then And if we start focusing on our abilities, we start changing the way we think, and we do grow confidence. Every time we meet a challenge, our self-esteem improves, our mood improves, we start to believe in ourselves, more confident. We start to do more. There is an actual way to get people who have given up, who are depressed, who are overwhelmed by the stress that life has provided them, and who are capable of living healthy, productive lives. So it isn't hopeless. And at the end, I always like to review. So starting off, you just have to understand that there are individuals who need 100% care, total care. You have to provide them with a home. You have to provide them with, somebody has to bring groceries into that home because they're not going to do it themselves. Somebody has to bring the medication into the home because they're not going to do it themselves. Somebody has to, dispense the medication and sit there while the person takes it. That's total care. After that, you're going to run into individuals with different degrees of negative attitude, and you need to change that attitude. And people who are overwhelmed, a lot of attitude is a philosophy that we have in life, is our map in life. It directly contributes to our idea of survival. And if a person believes that they have to do what they're doing, otherwise they won't survive, you're going to struggle greatly to try to change that philosophy to a different philosophy. But that is what you have to do, and you can use the resources in our environment. We can use the resources in our environment. We can use radio. We can use television. We can use the public education system, literature, movies, to teach a healthier perspective of life, a perspective that minimizes the manifestation of mental health illnesses. And of course, you have to deal with parents. You have to deal with childhood abuse, and we can. If we build a better society, we build a better society of individuals who are healthier, stronger, and who are teaching good mental health. Then you have individuals who, instead of being overwhelmed by life, being stressed out by life, and manifesting mental health issues, don't. So you start to improve health, and you start to minimize illness. And in that, you're going to have to understand the reality that the way people function is thoughts lead to emotions, and emotions and thoughts influence behavior. And what you want to teach is a healthy perspective, a perspective of hope, realism. I haven't spoken about realism, but to me, realism is not a lamentation. Realism is understanding that we do have a lot in life that we can use to help ourselves, to relax, to enjoy. We have radios, we have movies. Internet isn't all pornography. I find a lot of, I like music. I find a lot of musical entertainment on YouTube. So when we teach the positive, people become healthier, and the more healthy people in society generate healthy people in society. So the more we're healthy, the more we're going to be healthy. And as far as I'm concerned, I think I've covered it. Drug addiction, when I was starting, and I do have the voice of authority because I've looked at it. I didn't just wake up one day and say, a lot of people are walking around. A lot of people are walking around like they're experts, like everybody should listen to them. I got a degree. I still do a lot of self-study. I meditate on issues. I write articles. I tell people I don't just think of something. I prove it by writing an article on the issue. And, so the things that I concentrate on, addiction, the issues of psychology. Addiction is not something that I think, it's sad that we have created a category of mental health called addiction, that believes that something is in a particular manner and that's how it is. I personally would not, give that much attention to the category of addictions. Because if you look at it, you're basically dealing with the issues of psychology, of mental health, of depression, of anxiety. The people who are addicted because they're trying to deal with stressors. That is the coping mechanism that they have found. And yes, the body takes over. If you introduce a substance into the body long enough, eventually the body will want it. Not that the body has a brain, but the body will produce the neurotransmitters to create the craving for the drug when the levels of the drug are at a particular low point. But the paradigm of addiction is like anything else. It's basically, it's just like depression. Granted, it's a different behavior. That's what we're talking about. But the mental processes, the reason, the people don't understand that a lot of people who are what some would call addicted to drugs are actually enjoying using drugs. There are people who call themselves recreational drug users and who happen to believe they can start and stop at any particular point in time in their life, and who happen to believe that they're Superman or Wonder Woman, and the drug itself doesn't harm them. All of us can see meth and heroin and even marijuana has physical harm to the body. I mean, all of us can see that. They are under the perception that they can take any drug and it's not going to harm them. All of us here see evidence of overdose, of death from overdose. They're under the perception that their drug use isn't the problem. And that's a lot of drug addiction. I mean, a lot of people people may not like this idea, but a lot of people who are homeless want to be homeless. A lot of people who are addicted to drugs want to be addicted to drugs. Addiction in itself is not a horrible, tortured experience for a lot of people. So you're trying to solve problems, challenges, by believing that if you provide a home and you provide meals and you provide medication and medical treatment, that the individual is going to change and stop being, suffering from the illness of drug addiction. And the reality is that for a lot of people, this is a lifestyle. This is the way they prefer to live. For what reasons, I don't know. I would not want to be a panhandler. I would not want to be a beggar. I wouldn't want to live on the streets. I enjoy, 3 meals a day, comfortable bed to sleep in, entertainment to distract me. It's something I cannot personally see wanting to do. But there are a lot of people who, for some odd reason, enjoy the homeless experience. So you're going to try to help people who don't want to be helped, who will take $2,000 from you and wish you well and turn around and go back to their tent or whatever overpass they live under. And when you're dealing with these issues, you have to understand the issues at themselves. But on the basis, individuals who are there because life has overwhelmed them, given them, overloaded them with mental health challenges they cannot cope with. They've lost the reason. Stress has gone to the point that you could put them in the category of psychosis because they no longer have a perception of reality. You have to start restructuring, and you start restructuring with first teaching them to relax, and 2, manage their emotions, and 3, start restructuring their philosophy of life. You can engage in drug addiction. I would say, you can engage in drug addiction. I personally would not focus on it. You start feeding the body starts to naturally heal itself, and people start to sleep, they start to relax, they start to concentrate, and they're able to make better decisions. So if you wanted to deal with homelessness in America, where in the two categories of individuals who need total care or individuals who have been overwhelmed by life and are experiencing manifested mental health issues. And I say manifested because we create it. We become afraid. We stress ourselves out with our philosophies, with our ideas that are negative, that give us impressions of being hopeless, that life is hopeless, there's nothing we can believe in, there's nothing that we can use to help ourselves, there are no resources that we can get, there are no jobs. We convince ourselves that there are no jobs, that there isn't a family member we can rely on. Some of us don't want to burden our family members. So we convince ourselves of all this, and when we convince ourselves of all this, we take on all the emotions that come with it, all the pain and suffering, and that complicates the problem more because we're stressed out, and now we're stressing ourselves out more. And that's why I call it manifested, because we have created the reason for it. An individual who has been raped or used as a punching bag by their husband has every reason to have anxiety. However, it's still manifested. We're still creating the fear because we know that there are things that we can do. If you have suffered if you have been raped, that's a reality. But how you put it in its place, it's a choice. And it's an overwhelming experience. By all means, it's an overwhelming experience. And that's another thing. When you start to speak on this issue, and I have to include this. People, when you start to speak in the voice and tone of authority that I speak in, a lot of people start to accuse you of being insensitive, of judging people, of condemning, persecuting, prosecuting. And information is a tool of education. And if I say anything, if I write any article, if I do any video blog, it's not because I want to blame the victim or complicate the victim's issues in life by making them feel persecuted. No. You can use information to help yourself, or you can use information to hurt yourself. It's a choice. Literally, life is a choice. We can choose to be depressed, or we can choose to be happy. We can choose to have anxiety, or we can choose to be at peace. Life is a choice. That's what you need to teach individuals who have given up on life and who are homeless, high degree of mental health issues, and even addiction. And people could make the case that the addiction exists because the individual is trying to medicate the pain. But the pain comes from the thoughts that the person has. And our society, our culture teaches us to be rather negative. If there's one thing that our society teaches us very well, is negative. It teaches us that divorce is a bad thing. It teaches us that death is a bad thing. And it complicates our life with these negative thoughts because we don't know what to do with them. We don't know how to surpass it. We don't know how to win. And the reason we don't know how to win is because nobody ever taught us how to win. Nobody ever taught us about relaxation therapy or emotional management or cognitive restructuring. And we meet these challenges and they tear us apart. They overwhelm us. The pain and suffering is excruciating. It's something that people who don't study mental health don't understand why the person decided to swallow a bottle of sleeping pills. For a long time, there was this foolish idea that it's a mind thing, and if people would just, they're doing it to themselves. And I'm saying that they're doing it to themselves. But the reality is, it is, when I say overwhelming, I mean literally overwhelming. There is this Drew Barrymore, the actress, in an interview said that there was a particular time in her life, in her personal experience, where she would wake up dreading life, that she knew it was going to be a torturous hell, and she just dreaded waking up every day in the morning. That's a reality for people, and we don't need to get into stupidity. We don't need to get into stupid ideas and philosophies and tell people, it's just in your head, get over it. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say it's in our heads, it is in our heads, but I'm not telling just to get over it. I'm telling to deal with it. It is healthy to deal with it. If you believe you need to cry, go ahead. Just don't cry forever. This is structured information to help people, and I happen to believe that as long as we're alive, there's hope. And any day, anybody could say, I've been doing things the wrong way, and change and start doing things the right way. So there are a lot of issues, but I think that I've dealt with them in a manner that we can provide a healthy system that can help individuals help themselves, and we can minimize the population of homelessness, drug addiction, mental health issues if we use better structures. I realize I'm a unique individual. I've been given the opportunity to sit and meditate on issues. People's lives are complicated by their friends and family members, and they don't have the time to think and meditate and work through what challenges are and how. I am a solutions-oriented person. I meditate on an issue to understand it, and then to build a strategy to deal with it. And a lot of people don't do that, but it does concern me that a lot of people think that individuals like myself spend our time judging others. I don't judge anybody. I do evaluate. You got to have a fair understanding what it is you're dealing with in order to deal with it. So, closing. People who need total care, and then there's individuals who can be helped by changing their thoughts and helping them deal with their emotions and teaching them a healthy way to live. And you got to deal with parents, attitudes of parents, abusive behavior of parents. You got to help people deal with the failures in life, which a lot of stresses come from failures in life. We have to understand that we are our own worst enemy, because we are the ones thinking the thoughts that are contributing to our pain and suffering. And that's what the issue is. The issue is depression and anxiety, but there are issues because of the pain and suffering that overwhelms the person, causes pain, suffering, hurt, angst, and keeps the individual from being able to concentrate on healthy practices in life. And if you want to deal with homelessness, and you want to deal with mental health and drug addiction as it deals with homelessness, it'd be a good idea to structure your system under as I have defined the issues and explained the issues. Thank you for listening, and I wish you well.